Okay, you, sir, are a great songwriter. Let me tell you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had not heard that before. Anyway.
No, phenomenal. Yes, and for any of the musicians out there, he put the secondary dominant, the 5 or 6, just right in the right spot. Let me tell you.
That's right.
Did you know anything about theory?
I do. I actually have a music major from college. I taught theory for a little while. I tutored it for my classmates. So, yeah, I enjoy theory. Enjoy it a lot.
So what do you think about it?
About theory?
Yeah.
It's all theoretical. Music is math. That's all music is. So if you can learn the math of it, then you can get the structure of it, and things fall together for you. But at the same time, it's also very subjective and individualistic. I don't know if you ever did diagramming, and so, a chord, let's say B in the bass and then A, D, and F sharp. That's D over B, or it's a B minor 11. Pick which one do you want. And so, it's that kind of a deal. So there's a lot of wiggle room there, but at the same time, there's the mathematical foundation, which is always going to be the same.
Yeah, you're saying one sound can have a lot of different names.
Yeah, and even notes. Yeah, if you try it at the piano sometime, if you play middle C, and you play a C minor triad, C, E flat, G, play that middle C, then play a C major triad and play that middle C, the two C's sound different because they've got the intonation of the chord that came before them. It's weird, but it actually works. You try it sometime, but yeah, I love theory. I love the backbone, the structure of music, and it makes it a lot easier for me anyway to write, to kind of know what I'm doing and where things are going. So,
yeah, I feel the same. It helps guide me and orient me as I'm hearing new things, as if I want to play around with some different sounds or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your thought about music? What does music tell you about God's creation?
What does music tell me about God's creation? Well, the symmetry of it and the math that we were talking about, the order and the logic of it, tells me that it's not accidental, just like everything else around us. If we look at what's around us and then can't say there's a creator, then we're fooling ourselves. We're being foolish at that point. And it's the same thing with music, the way the intervals work together. And when I write a song, I look back at it and I think, I didn't write that because I would have never come up with that. And even songs that I've written, 10 or 15 years ago, I listen to them now and I think, how did you get that lyric? And the fact is I didn't get that lyric. God got that lyric and then just kind of handed it over to me. And there's a joke about that, about people who stand on stage and say, this is the song the Lord gave me, and you think afterwards, I see why he didn't want it, and that's why he gave it to you, because it was really terrible. But that's neither here nor there. But, so, yeah, it's just, music is revelation of God in everything. I mean, because there's no way I'm going to come up with that. I'm fully comfortable saying that any and every piece of musical ability that I've ever had is a gift from God. I practiced and I cultivated, but I didn't start it, never could, so I guess that's pretty close to an answer.
Yeah, have you always been a believer?
No. It'd be impossible to always be a believer. I don't even remember when I was a baby, so sorry. I went forward. I grew up in the Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Church, what would be referred to in the last few years as fundamentalist Southern Baptist Church. I mean, pretty strict. So I went forward on Easter Sunday, 1967, because my sister, who was 3.5 years older than me, had gone forward as well. It meant nothing. Honestly, it was, as they say, I went into the baptistry a dry center and came up a wet one. But I wanted to, be like my sister. So from 7 to 19, I just lived my own life, did what I wanted to do, did what most teenagers do, especially in, small town Indiana when there's nothing else to do except drink and get into trouble. Basically that's it. My parents, my whole family, were all very devout, very strict. So God was always a presence. There was never a point in time where I thought there is no God or God's not around or any of that. He was always there. I make reference a lot of times to the crooked finger of my grandmother, which was always there, David, and that was God. That's really what that was. But on my birthday, when I was 19, on my 19th birthday, I did make it real. I really fallen under conviction, is what it was. To tell you the truth, I was playing with some friends, playing church music, which in that days was, Bill Gaither, get all excited, go tell every, that was cutting edge. And I was lying in bed one night, just staring at the ceiling, and it wasn't a physical voice, but it was a voice nonetheless that said, you're a hypocrite. Because you're out there playing this music and people love it and they enjoy hearing you play, but you're not living that life at all. You're not. And so at that point I said, well, I got to give up one or the other. So I decided I was going to get right with God at that point. So really that's when my walk began, probably was when I was 19. But like I said, it was always there. My parents raised me in that tradition. My grandparents, everybody I knew, that was, it was God. He was there. It just took me a while to find him, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the gospel?
The gospel is the good news of Christ, that we, in and of ourselves, are hopelessly lost, and deservedly so. But
why deservedly so?
Because, well, ever since Adam and Eve, we have a sin nature. Now, we don't have original sin, okay, or at least I don't believe we do.
So for anybody who's watching and doesn't know what original sin is.
Okay, so we're not born under the burden of sin. That's why some faiths choose to baptize infants, because they believe you're born with a sin burden. So even as an infant, as a child who has no idea of right and wrong, you still have a sin burden on you. So you have to have that resolved, and the way they resolve that is by baptizing you as an infant or as a young child. So I don't believe that. I do believe that we're born with a sinful nature, which is to say that when we get old enough that we know the difference between right and wrong, we will choose wrong. That's our nature. That's what we do. It's how we're wired. And it's been that way ever since Adam. I don't know about you. I'm not going to try to figure out which Adam and Eve, who's to blame, but there's enough blame to go around. Anyway, back to the point. So we are lost and hopeless and deservedly so, because we are born with the sinful nature that was imputed to us through Adam and Eve's rebellion in the garden. So the good news, the gospel, is that God loved us enough to purchase our salvation through the blood of Jesus. And the blood of Jesus is the only thing that could purchase our salvation. So, the Old Testament, they made sacrifice after sacrifice. They laid the sins on the scapegoat and sent them out into the wilderness, but that just rolled it back for a year. There was no forgiveness there because there was no sacrifice that could achieve forgiveness. And so we had to wait for Jesus for that. But once we get to Jesus, fully man, fully God, and that's important because if he's not fully man, then he's not really a worthy sacrifice because he's a sacrifice for man. So that brings us to Jesus, fully God, fully man, able to sin if he wanted to, but didn't. Perfect. And so, in that way, a perfect sacrifice for us. So that's where the gospel comes to fruition. I guess in 2 points, in the sacrifice, the crucifixion, and then 3 days later in the resurrection. So the good news, the gospel, is that while we were hopeless, while we were yet in our sin, Christ died for us. And because of that, we don't have to be afraid anymore. I mean, life is going to try to knock you down as many times as it can, and it knocks us all down. But the point of it is we get back up, we strive, we get through it, and we know that at the end of all of this, it's going to be eternity with God. It's going to be perfection, and we won't have to worry about the stuff that we worry about today anymore. So that's the good news all the way through, from us being born into sinful nature to God caring enough for us to purchase us. The pearl of great price. I always grew up with the story that the pearl of great price, the pearl was Jesus, because that's the thing that's most valuable. The pearl's not Jesus. The pearl's us, because we couldn't purchase anything. We don't have any method to do that. God did, though. God purchased us with Jesus. So he went and sold everything he had, so to speak. He took his son and then took that price and redeemed us with it. So, the good news is we're doomed without God, but with him, man, we're going to live forever. And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. You said that the life knocks you down and you got to get back up. How has the gospel helped you get back up, or what has happened to you where the gospel was really relevant in your life?
I've been so blessed, and there are little things that enter my life from time to time, but the great tragedies, honestly, are few and far between for me. But even in the little things, I rely on the fact that whatever comes my way, it's temporary. And I've talked to a lot of people about this idea of, well, if you're following God and if you're doing what God wants you to do, then nothing bad will happen to you. And that's wrong.
That's wrong.
That's absolutely wrong. The point is, if you're following God and you're living in relationship with God and you have the peace of Jesus and you have the Holy Spirit abiding in you, bad things are going to happen to you. They're going to happen to you all the time, but you have a way out. And that's not to say it's going to turn out good. It may turn out horrible, but God is still there. And because God is still there, you can learn from it. You can move on from it, and you can know that whatever it is, it's temporary. In the end, it's all going to go away. So that's how the gospel gets me through large and small things, is just the knowledge that, in the overall scheme of things, this is insignificant. Even the tragedies are insignificant in the overall scheme of things.
Well, have you seen the gospel, or have you seen Christ work in somebody's life?
Where have I seen Christ work? I wrote a song called I Wonder If God Still Changes Hearts, because I went for a really long time not seeing the gospel working in anybody's life. And I think you get that if you live in the church. And there's nothing wrong with the church. The church is wonderful. You don't get to hardly see people's lives changing, because everybody that comes to church, for the most part, they're all like, "Yay, God!" and everything's, and you've got to get outside there if you want to see somebody's heart really truly changed. He won't watch this, so I can say that the person I've seen, he may watch it, I don't know. The person I've seen his life changed the most is probably my son. There was a period of time for he and I, is that grammatically correct? Me and him? I don't know. Where we were a bit on the outs. We had some conflict, and you trust me, when your kids get older, you'll have conflict. But it was him that returned to me, and the reason he did is because God worked in him to say, this is not the relationship that you should have with your father. And I'm not saying he was at fault. I'm saying that he returned to me. My nature is, if you don't have anything to do with me, okay. Even with my son, it was that. It was, I'm going to give you the room that you want. I'm going to give you all the room in the world. But God spoke to him and really, well, this is actually kind of an example for your previous question. The way God spoke to him was a friend of his in school, her father died unexpectedly. And she was shattered because she didn't have a great relationship with him. And so she was left now with all this unresolved strain and everything. And he saw that working in her, and he thought, I can't be that guy, And so God didn't cause, I don't want to get into that, used the unexpected death of somebody to mend my relationship with my son, and that was really cool. And now, I mean, I said earlier, actually, in talking to Allison, that there's nothing better than playing music with your kids, because I play with both my kids. There probably is, because from time to time he will call me with a theology question. That's maybe the coolest thing ever, because we get to talk about it, and they're not shallow questions, they're deep questions. And so I see him growing in that. I know when he calls and asks me a question like that, that's been on his mind. And it's not on his mind because he thought of it. It's on his mind because God said, let's think about this together, that kind of thing. So, really long answer, but there you go.
How old's your son?
My son is 34.
34? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful thing.
It's cool.
You'll have to ask me a question that I can answer with my daughter, too, because they're in constant conflict over who I like more. So she'll be really unhappy if I don't talk about her.
Okay, who do you like more, your son or your daughter?
I like my wife more. So there you go.
There you go. Well, okay, I've got a daughter. My life changed when she was born.
It does.
What's the most profound thing you've learned from having your daughter as a father?
The most profound thing about
powerful,
from my daughter in particular, grace. Honestly, I'm not married to their mother any longer. We were married for 19 years, and we divorced. And my daughter was 13 when we divorced, I think, and she was so gracious to me. That the previous thing I spoke about my son and I, having difficulties was because of this divorce. For my daughter, it was the exact opposite. She was bound and determined that she was going to have the same relationship, even though I no longer lived in the house, and she was so gracious to me in that. And so I've never forgotten that. We're immensely close. And she teaches me a lot about that. The other way it changed my life was understanding, let's see the best way to put this. I don't think I ever understood when I was a teenager dating the anxiety that I could cause some girl's parents. If I open the door and he reminds me of me in any way, shape, or form, I'm just going to close the door and you're not going anywhere that night. So it taught me to be more considerate of maybe my impact on things, because I would have never thought about that until I had till she got into her teens and started wanting to go out. And then it was like, I wanted to do FBI background checks, and then we're going to have to go out to the woods and maybe only one of us will come back, that kind of deal. There was just, it was some pretty serious stuff. But I recommend just having boys. It's so much easier. So much easier.
That's funny. That is funny, yeah.
It's too late for you, though. Sorry.
Yep. Well, it's true. Well, maybe. I'm a family man, so. Well, what do people misunderstand about the gospel?
I think that the major thing people misunderstand about the gospel is this idea that you need to get stuff straightened out before you come to God. And that's a pretty simple answer, but it's the one I see the most. It's hard to convince somebody, especially in this day and age, that the God's unconditional. I'll give you an example. We were driving out somewhere. I don't remember where it was, just the other day. And we stopped at McDonald's. I wanted something to drink. I like their sweet tea. So I got a sweet tea. And as I'm picking up the sweet tea, the guy behind the counter says, "Hey, I want to ask you a question." I said, "Yeah." I thought this was going to be some really deep, philosophical question. He says, "Would you like a chocolate milkshake?" And he holds it up to me, and my first answer instinctively was, "What's wrong with it?" You know, that's the way people are today. We're skeptical, we're cynical. So when you try to tell somebody, you don't have to, as a matter of fact, you can't get your stuff straight before you come to God. That's the whole purpose. You just come to God just as you are, then the first thing people think is, what's the catch? Because nobody loves like that. Nobody does that, especially these days. You know, these days, love and kindness and civility are just out the door. I mean, so that's probably the thing people misunderstand the most. I think second place probably would be the idea that they think that Christians are judgmental hypocrites, which some are, and hey, some aren't. That's fine. But honestly, you know, speaking the truth in love is kind of a lost art. And so your exposure to Christianity a lot of times is people telling you what you're doing wrong or how bad of a person you are. And so that becomes the face of Christianity, when I know way, way more people who are like, we love you. Don't really care what you've done. Don't really care what you are at this point. We just love you, and we want you to get to know God. So that's probably the two things I think people misunderstand the most.
Yeah, we've got great friends that are like that. You know, they look past the humanness of us and the weaknesses that we have,
Yeah.
and man, they love us no matter what, and they support us.
Those are good friends to have.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
Yeah.
And what's the toughest thing you've gone through as a father? I'm a young father. Okay, I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old. Okay, and 4-year-old, actually a 4 and a 3-year-old. He just had his birthday this week.
Yeah.
What's the toughest thing you've gone through as a father? And how did Christ help you through that?
Well, the toughest thing was an ongoing thing, and still is an ongoing thing, and that's letting them fail. Because I failed so many times that basically there's really nothing stupid they can do that I haven't already done. So, you know, I want to approach them and say, okay, here's what you're getting ready to do, and here's how it's going to turn out. Because I've done this before and I know that. But you're young enough, shoot, I'm young enough to remember when my parents approached me and said, this is how it's going to turn out. And I said, you don't know anything, old man, leave me alone. And went on my way and then learned. So letting them fail, and I don't mean like letting them walk off a cliff, you know, that's no. But I mean, letting them have the freedom, even at their ages now, I mean, they're 34 and 31, but all through their young adult and adult life, just letting them have the freedom to learn from their mistakes. And I'm a big proponent of learning from your mistakes. I think we learn infinitely more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So, you know, if being able to give them that latitude, even though I knew, it's funny, we talked in church this morning about predestination, and you know, that's a kind of a good example of predestination. Is I'm the father, they're the child, and I see what they're going to do, and I absolutely know what's going to happen. But I'm not going to step in and stop it. So basically, my child is in essence predestined to do this, you know, and to make this mistake. But I've got to stand back and let them do that. And even now, with parenting, you know, I'll see them doing something. Man, I really hope they don't watch this. I'll see them doing something parenting-wise and think, that's not a good idea. But I can't jump in there and say that. I've got to let them find it out. So that's the hardest part, and it always has been the hardest part of parenting. And both my children came to Christ at an early age, but there was always the worry that that they were living in God. You know, that they were maintaining a relationship with God too. That's terrifying.
Why is that terrifying?
Well,
That they're not living in God?
the
or that they
thought
are?
that they might not.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. No, not that they are. That they might not. You know, because I'm obviously I don't keep tabs on them 24 hours a day. I don't know what they do or don't do. But just even the slightest inkling that they might, not be in a relationship with God is terrifying to me, because I don't want to face that prospect. When my now son-in-law called me to ask for my daughter's hand in marriage, I told him two things. I said, first, you're the only person she's ever dated that I would say yes to. And secondly, I will only say yes if you promise me that my grandchildren will be raised in the church. And so he did, and I actually performed their ceremony. And so the first thing when they got up there, before anything else, I looked him in the eye and I said, "Are you going to keep the promise you made to me?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, then we can go on now. We can finish the service." Because I would have just stopped there and walked off the stage. I mean, I had no problem with it. But so, yeah, it's just the I don't fear the temporary things, but I would always fear the eternal things in regards to my kid's life.
Yeah.
And now with my grandchildren, it's basically just starting all over again.
Yeah, tell me about that, your grandchildren.
Well, I've got 8 of them. They're ages 2 to 13. And I think in terms of how old will I be, how old will they be when I'm gone? And so like the 2-year-old, if I live 20 more years, this kid will be 22. How am I going to be able to influence this kid? And how long am I going to have to influence this kid? I never thought that with the kids, because you're young at that point. You're 30, 40 years old. You're going to live forever. But, now I'm 60. And so I think in terms of the grandchildren, and it's like, what am I going to see in their lives? What am I going to have an opportunity to influence in their lives? How long am I going to have?
I don't want to interrupt you here, but one thing I find interesting is that, you were talking about the grandchildren shifted you from thinking to your death and how old they're going to be when you're gone. What I find really fascinating about the scriptures is that it's rude. There's a thread of family, right? It's all about genealogy. Mm-hmm. And to tie one more thing into that is, the spirit, the youthful spirit thinks about what they're going to do with their life, and the mature spirit thinks about what they're going to do with their death.
Yeah.
In terms of your grandchildren, what was the impact you had? I mean, I was blown out of the water when I held my daughter. Mm-hmm. I couldn't prepare for it.
You can't.
Cut the umbilical cord, held her, and everything changed, just like that. Now, what was it like holding your grandchild for the first time?
Well, and there's some additional stuff that goes along with that. I will say, when I held my first one, my son, my oldest one, I was frightened because I didn't like kids. I'm still not crazy about it. But I didn't like kids. I was honestly afraid that this little baby was going to come out and I was going to be like, meh, But no, it was love at first sight. It was there's no other experience like that. With my grandchildren, I'm adopted. I grew up not having any blood family at all. My adopted parents were great. My adopted family was great. It was never one of those, I want to go find my real mom. It was never one of those deals. But there was always that absence of blood. So when my son was born, that was the first person I knew who was blood related to me. Mm. That was the first one. And then when my daughter was born, that was the second one. And that was it, 2 of them. And then 25 years later, when my first grandchild was born, that was the third person in my entire life. I mean, and not many people can say that. That was the third person in my entire life that I knew that I was blood related to. And so when I held her, it blew me out of the water. It was just like, I never knew this was so important until I had my own children and then my grandchildren. They're fabulous. I mean, it's so good. There are so many, ideas about being a grandparent. I firmly adhere to the idea that one of my jobs as a grandparent is to teach my grandchildren the things their parents don't want them to know. Just the little cute things that'll get them into trouble later, that kind of a deal. So
Well, like what?
I love that. Let's see. Well, for instance, I taught one of them when her father said, "You have to go to bed," to tell her, "Grandpa says that you got out of bed 15 times every night once they put you to bed." So he didn't really appreciate that, but it was the truth. And so I felt it was my job to inform little Mia that, your father, who's trying to get you to go to bed, was the worst person to put to bed in the history of people. So, I feel like it's only fair that you pass on to him some of the grief that he passed on to me. And it's a wonderful thing to watch your grandchildren grieve your children like they grieved you. It's beautiful. It's justice. That's what it is.
That's funny. That's good.
Oh, it's nice. You'll see it someday.
Oh,
You will.
I will. What are your musical disciplines?
Writing is my only musical discipline. I've been blessed from day one when I started up the piano. It was easy. And it's been easy ever since then. I was a piano major in college, and of course, we went through Beethoven, Brahms, Bach, Chopin, Schubert, all of those, and you got to apply yourself to that, and you got to work at that. But there was never a point where it was just like, I can't do this, And then getting out of college and getting into working in the church, to be honest, church music is not the most musically challenging music ever. It used to be, back when we had the hymns and you had a chord change every beat and all these things. But then they started into the gospel songs and then the choruses, and then from there it's gotten pretty simplistic these days.
Yeah.
So practice is not from. I don't practice. There's nothing I practice.
Well, you make a good. Sorry to kind of do a little tangent, but what do you think the difference is between music and worship?
Between music and worship, worship is not exclusively music. To me, worship is a lifestyle. I think that there are avenues and methods for worship and for even enhancing worship, and I think music is one of those, because a good deal of worship, if not all of it, is heart, and music touches the heart. Now, I have a problem sometimes when I listen to music that music touches my head more than it does my heart, because I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, where's this going to go now? I knew that's the chord that was going to be, that kind of thing. And that's really annoying when you get that stuck in your head. But for the most part, music goes to the heart. And so music facilitates worship. But this equation of the two, I'm never a big fan of, people who will stand up and we have the service and we have the prayer and okay, now we're going to have some worship and then we'll have the sermon. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
The sermon's worship too. The offering's worship. When you get out and you drive in your car, the way you act to people who are in the other lane is worship. All of that is worship. All of that is you acknowledging God and His favor, not even favor, presence in your life. So that's the biggest difference. You can have music without worship, and you can have worship without music, but they do fit together very nicely.
Yeah, they do. What are your spiritual disciplines?
I'm horrible at those two. Now, the biggest one's prayer, and I don't pray enough. And honestly, I don't know anyone who does, which is not a cop-out. But I don't pray enough. I enjoy study. I enjoy the study of the Word. I enjoy reading the same passage for the 100th time and finding something else from it. I enjoy the structure of it. I enjoy when you look at things and they just pop out at you. So I'd say prayer and study are probably the two biggest disciplines. The one that's missing, I don't know if that was going to be your follow-up or not, is probably quiet. I don't make enough time for quiet. I don't. If it's quiet, I want to go do something. I want to find something to do. And honestly, that's, when God really likes to speak to us, I think, is when we're sitting still
Yeah.
and paying attention.
That's right.
So I don't do that. I try to incorporate that into prayer life so that it's not just a Christmas list of things I want from God, but I do try to take some time to sit still and say, look, if you got something to say, now'd be a great time, which is, really arrogant on my part to tell God, hey, now'd be a great time to talk to me. But
You may go now.
still,
God.
yeah. But still, I that's the thing that's definitely missing. I know that for a fact is just the quiet.
So is there anything, what's the difference between religion and spirituality?
Neither one of those are particularly good terms, honestly, to me. When somebody says to me they're really spiritual, most of the time that they say that to me, God's nowhere in the equation. It's just, I'm really spiritual, man. I'm really spiritual. And it's like, yeah, but do you know God? No, I don't want to be caged into that. I just want to be spiritual. Religion, as the old trope says, is religion is man reaching to God. Christianity is God reaching to man. So I'm not a huge fan of religion either. I think some atrocious things have been done in the name of religion. And I would just as soon just be a Christian. Just be a Christian may even have gotten some bad. I just want to follow Jesus. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about names. Don't worry about labels. And I'm not sure there's a huge difference between spirituality and religion in the classic sense. Really, I don't know. If you want to, I don't know. I should have asked: is it capital S spirituality or small s spirituality?
And does that mean if that's the spirit of God, or if that
Well,
is
we always capitalize that one. If somebody says, the Spirit's moving and it's the lower S, then I'm not really interested in that because I think that's probably empty emotion. But if the Spirit with a capital S is moving, well, now there's where we need to pay attention at that point. So it can be, I guess, as simple as a uppercase or lowercase letter.
So what's the Holy Spirit?
What? Who is the Holy Spirit?
There you go.
He's not a what. Well, I mean, you start from the beginning. He's the third person in the Trinity. Jesus called him Paraclete, advocate, which is basically the same idea as a lawyer, somebody who stands and gives your defense in front of the judge. He called him the Comforter. And he's also, as I previously mentioned, that crooked finger of my grandmother going, don't do that. That's him too. So he convicts, he teaches, he enlightens, all those things.
Yeah.
And that's his purpose.
Yeah, that same spirit is the spirit of, is that come from the same place where you, like, as children say, I'm going to do the wrong thing? Are these tied together?
Well, I mean, the obvious and logical choice of doing the wrong thing is the lack of spirit. I think that, well, that's probably the one thing, the other thing I should have said, maybe the Spirit's, one of his largest responsibilities is, I think it's the Spirit who changes you. It's the Spirit of God embedded in you, imbued to you, given to you, that changes you. I'll give you an example, and this is a weird example, but when I was a kid, I was just a wild child. I would do anything. I would take anything. I stole 2 motorcycles because I liked them and I wanted to ride them. Just whatever. I would just do that. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was in Home Depot. And I was just walking around there because Home Depot's the coolest store in the history of mankind. And I was over in the pressure washers. And there was a pressure washer sitting up there, and it was a really nice one. And I don't know if you have one or not, but they have the 4 colored knobs that are different pressures. Mm-hmm. And the red one is the tightest one, has the hardest pressure. Well, my pressure washer at home, I lost my red one. And so this was just a display. It wasn't one that was for sale, it was a display. And there, 2 feet away from me was one of these little red knobs. Just reach up, take it, put it in your pocket, walk away. Nobody's hurt. It's just a display. And as I thought that in the back of my mind, I found myself physically uncomfortable with the thought. And so here's a guy who, as a teenager, I probably would have taken the entire pressure washer, not just the knob. But here I am as an adult who is being changed daily by the Spirit, becoming physically uncomfortable with even a little insignificant piece that doesn't belong to me. And that's what the Spirit does. The Spirit changes you and to be more like God, to be more like Jesus. And maybe all those other things work into that, but that's maybe his biggest job.
So you say that the voice in your head was coming from the wrong place, but the Holy Spirit inside you, do you think that spirit can change, that if you do the wrong thing, that spirit dies? And
well, the Bible says we can fight with God's Spirit long enough that He'll say, okay, if that's the way you want to go, then you go that way. It's not God giving up on us; it's us giving up on God to the point where God says, all right. So yeah, you can stifle the Spirit. You can push it away long enough that it makes a difference in your life. Absolutely. And it wasn't a voice. When I was looking at that, it was a thought. It was a passing thought. Yeah, you can take that. And then it wasn't a voice that said not to. It was actually like a physical discomfort, and I think that was a spiritual manifestation in a physical way, to say no, can't do it. And to me, that's part of what the Spirit does. Anyway.
Yeah. What's your favorite story in the Old Testament?
If she said New Testament, would have been a lot easier. Joseph.
And the coats of many colors?
That's part of it. Joseph is a story of betrayal at the hands of family, which is something I understand, and persistence, faith, and imagine, you make a deal with the guy in prison with you, that when he gets out, he's going to, vouch for you. And then he forgets for 2 years. It's like, forgets that for 2 years. So faith, to stay there and know that God's got him. Faith when he's unjustly accused and ends up in prison in the first place, to know God's got me. And then ultimately redemption. And after redemption, even grace, that he shows grace to his family. I mean, what's our inclination if the guys who threw us in a hole and left us be sold into slavery show up wanting food? I mean, our human inclination is, oh, no. Nah, the tables are turned, my friend. But, Joseph had grace. I mean, there's grace all over the Old Testament. Joseph had grace. And was moved and wept, and he was a little, underhanded about, everything with his younger brother and getting his dad there and everything. But at the same time, it was all for the purpose of once he was redeemed, redeeming his family. So, I mean, that's a great story. There's every element of life in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an awesome story.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, Genesis is full of awesome stories like that.
Genesis is a great book. It really undervalued as far as reading goes. That's a novel, and it is a beautiful novel.
It is, and one of my biggest hurdles that I had to get over was listening to other people tell me what the Bible was about. Yeah. It was until I took to it, and the way I took to it actually, and that got me started, was to pull up an audiobook on YouTube. And Alexander Scorby, he's got a great, I listen to him.
Get good pipes.
And then I follow in the book. I mean, it's verbatim, So anyways, yeah, I mean, went through Genesis, went through a lot of it. We haven't got through all of it. We're studying Ezra right now, and, there's a lot of the same redemptive qualities and betrayal and listening to the Spirit, because that is the highest form of authority for me. Yeah. And what I do and what I don't do. And once I get that green light, then I go.
Yeah.
So the question that I had for you is, how has God...
I've had a bunch of questions.
The next one.
Oh, you've got another one. Okay.
How has God used adversity in your life to mature you?
To mature me.
Not saying you're mature, but
I'm old. I may not be mature. Thinking about that in regards to a specific thing. Like I said earlier, I'm so blessed. There's not a lot of adversity in my life.
what about the divorce? Was that, without,
No,
did that mature you?
it ultimately did. After that divorce, I got married again. I married a girl who was not a believer, and lasted for about 2.5 years. And it was maybe the worst 2.5 years of my life.
Why was it? How was her not believing? How did that affect things?
It made it difficult for me to do anything related to God. A church was difficult. Bible study was difficult. Prayer was difficult. Paul says it's a bad idea to marry an unbeliever because inevitably you don't win them over. They don't come over to the light with you. You usually end up going over to the dark with them, and that's a lot of what happened to me. Anyway, without getting into too much detail, it was miserable, and that ultimately ended in divorce. It was the best divorce ever. Sorry, but and I came out of that, and I said I'm not going to have a relationship for a good while. I said this to God. I said I want to focus on you. I want to sit still and listen to you and hear what you have to say. And so I went for a season without any relationships at all, and really not even friendships, honestly. Just me and God. And I moved away from one side of the country, clear to the other side of the country. I spent a season just trying to focus on what God wanted for me. And I wouldn't have done that without that adversity. I would have cruised along perfectly happy to just be Joe Christian, going to church every Sunday, playing music because, that's what I did. And I don't think I would have had that time. So that was something that adversity brought me. Adversity always brings, once you recognize it, always brings a deeper sense of appreciation for what you have, what you are, what you're doing, whatever. The idea that you can't do it, whatever it is, whatever the situation is, it always, at the end of it, to me anyway, brings you a deeper appreciation. That's the whole trials thing. And again, that's a theological minefield. Does God put trials in your life? Or
Predestination.
any of that thing. But trials are there for you to learn from. That's it. Doesn't matter what the source is, doesn't matter where it came from. What are you going to do with it? That's the idea. And so having that attitude has always made adversity be a learning experience for me at the end. I prayed once for God to make me more vulnerable, and I was, for the next week, as sick as I've ever been in my entire life.
Physically, spiritually,
ill. No, sick. Like I had to lay in a recliner and let people wait on me, which is the most uncomfortable thing in the world for me. But I thought, okay, I asked for vulnerability. I'm stuck in a recliner for a week with people waiting on me hand and foot, and me having to say I don't feel good and all that. It's like, okay, yeah, you got a real sense of humor there, God. That's cute. But you learn from it. That's what adversity's for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's too far of a stretch, but I do feel like, how are we doing, Russ? Good. Yeah, I do. But I do feel like, we're kind of like a baby's in a womb, and we're spiritually in a womb right now. And then when we die, we actually are going to be rebirthed.
Yeah, that's the birth. Yeah.
And
we're just forming and learning and growing and all that.
yeah. Okay, well, we've got one last question, and Allison went to go get something for you. So, elections are Tuesday. I think that life is a spiritual battle of right and wrong, good versus evil. And if you do the right thing, then the right path will unfold. If you do the wrong thing mindfully, the wrong path will unfold. What do you subscribe to that? Do you think that that this is really a spiritual battle? It's not about flesh and blood and color and race, creed, and all that. But do you think it's actually a spiritual battle first?
Yeah, everything begins as a spiritual battle. I mean, the like I mentioned earlier, the hatred, the anger, the loss of civility. Those are all just symptoms of spiritual problems. That's what those are. And
do you think if you do those, if you have those spiritual problems, that you are, in essence, following following your father, the devil, being a Southern Baptist?
If I have spiritual problems,
or if you mindfully choose the wrong decisions, are you following your father, Satan?
That's interesting. We may be semantically, apart or together here. I think you're following your nature, is what you're doing. And now, the idea of the Holy Spirit changing you, I believe that as the Spirit changes you, He changes your nature. So it should become easier to do good and harder to do evil. So, as a believer, anyway, if I'm choosing to do evil, that's a task at this point. It's just not my second nature at this point to do evil.
Right.
Now it's something I've kind of got to put some effort into, and so, yeah. I mean, you take it to the parent metaphor. I mean, how many times you'll get this as children? I would look at my children and go, "What were you thinking? Why did you do that?" And of course, their answer is always the same. "Oh, I don't know." And I see God going, "What were you thinking?
Right.
Why did you do that?" The other moment is "Don't you know who I am?" When your 8-year-old sasses you back and you're like, "How can you talk that way to me? Do you not know who I am?"
Oh, I'm saying that to my
I hold the
4-year-old.
power of life and death, that kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And God does that all the time. Don't you have any idea who you're talking to at this point in time? So it's, I don't know that it's necessarily following your father, Satan, as much as it is willfully disobeying what your nature should be at this point in time. If God's in there, if the Spirit's changing you.
Oh, so you don't think you're born with that sinful nature?
No, you're born with the sinful nature, but I think as you join relationship with God and as His Spirit works on you, your nature changes. Now, we're not going to be perfect, obviously. That's never going to happen. But like I said, as your nature changes, it should become more natural for you to do good than to do evil. 16-year-old David.
Why is the country in a mess? Half of the people seem like that they're spiritually corrupt.
Well, I think the last number I saw was 80% of people in the country consider themselves to be Christians, and mostly because they go to church, which, like the old saying goes, you're no more a Christian because you go to church than you are a car because you sit in a garage, that kind of an idea. I think if I were going to try to put an estimate on the number of really Spirit-led, Christ-following people in America, it wouldn't be 80%. It might be 20%.
But don't you think that everybody is Spirit-led? They're just going the wrong.
I guess if you want to think about which Spirit, when I say it, I'm talking about God's Spirit. Yeah, we're all Spirit-led, one way or the other. But the reason the country looks like the country looks today is just because people have just turned away from God. And they, as the church has done to me, I think, a pretty poor job of educating people as to what it means to be a Christian.
Yeah.
I went to a church, and we had about 350 regular attenders. We had 1,300 people on the roll, on the church roll.
Jeez.
And so we decided that what we decided was we're doing a disservice to these people, because letting them stay on the roll was making them think that there was some spiritual significance to that. And there really wasn't. And so we sent out a letter to all these folks that we had, some of them I had never seen, and I'd been there for 8 years, and said, you're no longer fellowshipping with us. We'd like to just take your name off the roll and give you the opportunity to join somewhere else if you want to, or maybe you're already going somewhere else. And we'd get letters back that would say, we really have no intention of going to church. We don't want to go to church at all, but please leave our name on the roll. And it was like, because they thought that meant something. Right. And that's the church's fault, that people think that. So I think
but the church isn't anything.
Well, okay, it's the body's fault. It comes from the pulpit. It comes from the pew. It's our fault.
Or the church is the people.
Oh, yeah. That there are so many people out there right now that think relationship with God is one thing when it isn't. Right. And so, if they're following that wrong spirit, then they have the freedom to do all the things that we see in the headlines today. And that's not to say Christians are perfect, because we mess up too, and we do bad things too sometimes. But it's the exception rather than the rule,
right? Or
it should be. And so, I think that. And I was talking about this with Don on the way up here. Is the internet has ruined us. The conventional wisdom, as I was growing up, was that central air conditioning ruined society. Because before central air conditioning, everybody sat out on the porch, and you knew all your neighbors, and everybody talked and everything. And then central air came along, we all stayed in our houses, and we no longer talked to people. Well, the internet ruined society more than that. And it just, I don't want to take this the wrong way. The idea that you can say anything without getting punched in the face, has ruined society. Not that I would punch anybody in the face, but I'm sure I probably earned one or two in my life. But now you can say whatever you want. You can say the most hateful, horrible things to people, and you don't have to worry about any immediate repercussions. And so that lets people just do whatever they want to do. And as they do that, society begins to spin out of control, and we get to, I think, kind of where we are today, with just anger and bile and vitriol and polarization. You talked about the election, and I'm not that old, but I remember when there was bipartisan something from time to time. That's a myth now. I mean, that's
the sides aren't agreeing on anything.
Well, they disagree on principle. If you have the wrong, I don't want to get real political because I don't like politics, but if you have the wrong letter in front of your name, they dislike you immediately.
Right.
It never used to be that way.
Right.
As far just even Reagan. In Reagan and Tip O'Neill is a perfectly good example. Now I'm showing my age, of two guys who were just diametrically opposed politically, but were friends, social, and you don't see that anymore. You can't see that anymore because we're so far apart.
Yes, we are.
All right, enough of that.
Oh, it's great. So you said you like pizza.
Yeah.
So there's a local pizza in Wickenburg. Congress is just on the outsides of Wickenburg, and so this is a place called Carrie's Pizza. It's a little home grown place. Why don't you give a taste of that? Not that you want to. You want to pray for it?
Technically, I don't know. All right. Thank you for the food, Father. There. That's good. Oh man, that's good. What's the name? Carrie's?
Carrie's Pizza.
Wickenburg?
Wickenburg.
Will they deliver to Phoenix, do you think?
Will they? I don't know. We can ask them.
I can Grubhub.
Grubhub.
They weren't even open today.
They were not open today, and Allison went in there on a couple days ago, and they were still open. It was probably 7 o'clock at night, and he agreed that he would make a pizza for you.
Dude.
Yep.
Is that Carrie? Is that the guy?
Yep.
Carrie, you're the man.
Yeah. And
So grab
so,
Hubbard to Phoenix. I'll be calling you.
yep,
Listen, what do you do?
so,
It's
And
hard
they
to
have
find
the
a pizza.
quirkiest little restaurant. You go in and there's like a fire going, but they have like mixed match tables and chairs.
Yeah.
The bathroom has one of those old tubs.
Oh,
you know?
clawfoot tub?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
nice.
it says 5 cents for a bath, and it's cute.
I don't think I want somebody else bathing me.
Right?
Not even for 5 cents. But the pizza's great. Good
good,
deal. Good job, Carrie.
good. Well, David, thank you for being here.
Hmm.
Hey, appreciate it.
You just waited till I got my mouth full.
Yeah. So,
Thank you for having me. I was glad to be here.
Good, good. So until next time, guys, next week we're going to have a guest, actually another David.
Good.
So
Can't go wrong there.
we'll see you next time. Bye.